So Canada just cut off critical energy and mineral exports to the United States, and financial markets are absolutely in chaos right now. It's honestly hard to believe that our closest trading partner, the nation we've shared the world's longest peaceful border with for over 2 centuries, just pulled the plug on shipments that American manufacturers depend on every single day. But here's the kicker. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This is retaliation for Trump's 25% tariff threat that he's been wielding like a sledgehammer for weeks. We're talking about crude oil, natural gas, aluminum, steel, and rare earth minerals, all stopped. And trust me, the economic fallout is already starting to cascade through every sector you can imagine. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been walking a diplomatic tightrope since Trump returned to office. For months, Trudeau played the good neighbor, trying to negotiate, offering compromises on immigration enforcement and border security. He sent delegations to Mar-a-Lago. He called Trump personally. He even agreed to increase Canadian defense spending to meet NATO requirements, something the U.S. has been demanding for years. Whether it was border patrol cooperation, joint task forces on fentanyl trafficking, or commitments to buy more American defense equipment, Trudeau really cemented himself as the pragmatic ally trying to avoid a trade war. But here's where the rubber meets the road. We're now 3 weeks into this escalating crisis. American auto manufacturers are scrambling to find alternative aluminum suppliers. Midwest refineries are on the verge of shutdowns because they can't process the heavy crude they need. Construction projects across 17 states are on hold because Canadian steel shipments have stopped. This mess is unfolding because Trump and Trudeau are at a complete standstill over tariffs. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, every American business that depends on cross-border supply chains. Trudeau is supposed to be Canada's leader, protecting Canadian interests. But here's the thing, Trump isn't interested in negotiation anymore. He wants total capitulation. He wants Canada to absorb American tariffs without any response, to accept punitive trade measures, and to basically surrender economic sovereignty. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. This isn't just about two leaders having a disagreement. This is about decades of integrated North American trade suddenly being weaponized for political theater. Now, back to the matter at hand. Reports from around February 18th revealed just how frustrated Trudeau was becoming. He labeled Trump's proposed 25% tariff as economically insane, and even went as far as to say that no Canadian leader could accept such a punitive measure without reciprocal action. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Trudeau was calling Trump reckless for threatening Canada's economic security over manufactured border crises. And this wasn't a private conversation. Trudeau made sure to air his concerns publicly in Parliament, making it clear that he was not going to let Canada be bullied. This announcement sent shockwaves through North American business circles because it raised all sorts of questions. If Trudeau, the moderate guy himself, could turn against Trump's tariff threats, what did that mean for everyone else, scrambling to maintain trade relationships? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern. Trump's loyalty really only extends to himself and his political narrative. Whenever someone stops being useful or does something he doesn't like, he's quick to turn on them. We've spotted this pattern time and time again. Just think about how he turned on Theresa May right after she tried to negotiate Brexit terms that didn't align perfectly with his preferences. The UK Prime Minister got publicly humiliated on social media. Then there was Angela Merkel. Trump wasn't pleased when she stood firm on NATO burden-sharing negotiations. He called Germany delinquent and suggested pulling U.S. troops out of Europe. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Emmanuel Macron when the French president criticized Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord. Macron got labeled as having low approval ratings and trying to make France great again by copying Trump. Even Mexico's former president Enrique Peña Nieto faced a similar fate when he publicly refused to pay for the border wall. Trump canceled their White House meeting and spent months attacking Mexico as a source of criminals and drugs. Now it looks like Trudeau is in the hot seat. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. You can show all the loyalty in the world and defend American interests every single day, but the moment you step out of line or cease to be useful, Trump will toss you aside without a second thought. So, what did Trudeau do to tick off Trump? Well, it all boils down to refusing to be a punching bag. The impasse happened because Trump wanted Canada to accept 25% tariffs on steel, aluminum, and energy exports, while Trudeau was trying to negotiate exemptions based on integrated supply chains and national security partnerships. Ultimately, trade flows just stopped since no one was willing to budge. As Canada's Prime Minister, Trudeau decided to take a defensive retaliation stance. He announced reciprocal tariffs on American agricultural products, automotive parts, and consumer goods. He refused to let Canadian industries collapse without fighting back. His approach seemed to be just protecting Canadian workers and manufacturers. At first, Trump seemed to be on board with the idea of tough negotiations. He appreciates hardball tactics and the notion of countries fighting for their interests. But as the standoff dragged into its third week, some serious issues started cropping up. American factory slowdowns, supply chain disruptions, and rising consumer prices were all happening. While Canadians were steadfast and holding their ground, predictably, the American public began to shift their blame toward Trump's tariff policies. Polls indicated that Americans were increasingly frustrated with rising costs and economic instability. This was the moment Trump began to sweat a little. You see, Trump values winning, maintaining his strongman image, and overall economic performance numbers. He doesn't want to be tied to a recession that's being blamed on his tariff war. That's definitely not the victory he seeks. And then Trudeau went ahead and made a move that, according to Trump, was a serious misstep. Trudeau started looking for ways to protect Canadian industries and figured he should halt critical exports that American manufacturers couldn't easily replace. He even considered cutting energy flows to the Great Lakes region and stopping rare earth mineral shipments. But then, when Trump caught wind of all this, he absolutely lost it. In Trump's eyes, retaliating is just a sign of disloyalty. Cutting off energy exports, that's pure economic warfare. Any Canadian leader who dares to fight back is instantly labeled an enemy. Now this left Trudeau in a tight spot. On one side, he really needs to protect Canadian jobs and maintain his political support at home. The Canadian public will abandon him completely if he caves to American economic bullying. On the flip side, he actually has to maintain the trade relationship that employs millions of Canadians. That means figuring out how to de-escalate tensions, keep supply chains functioning, and avoid a full economic war. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of compromise and accepting some American demands. So Trudeau is caught in a bind. He can either keep fighting Trump's tariffs, which means economic pain for both countries, supply chain chaos, and job losses on both sides, and that only makes the situation worse and paints both nations in a bad light. Or he can do his actual job as Prime Minister, which means negotiating a resolution, accepting some concessions, and trying to maintain the relationship, but that'll definitely make Trump declare victory and embolden him to threaten other allies. It's a tough situation, and that's the mess Trump creates for Democratic leaders. He demands total submission and wants them to accept his terms without resistance, but then he points fingers when economies suffer. He's not shy about tossing them under the bus whenever it suits him. This whole scenario is causing major stress within the North American business community. If Trump has turned on Canada and is willing to publicly undermine the closest U.S. ally, every trading partner is left wondering if they're the next target. Those moderate Republicans who are trying to balance free trade principles with Trump loyalty are now worried sick about being the next ones to face primary challenges. Meanwhile, the Trump hardliners believe Trudeau isn't tough enough and that he's too open to compromise with global institutions. Things became even more intense when Senator Mitt Romney, one of the few remaining institutionalist Republicans, broke away from supporting Trump's tariff strategy. He had been pushing for maintaining traditional U.S.-Canada trade relations and criticized Trump for damaging America's most reliable partnership. When someone as aligned with business interests as Romney starts turning against you, you know you're in a world of hurt. The Canadian government decided to take legal action. On February 20th, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland filed a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization, stating that Trump's tariffs were violations of USMCA trade agreement provisions. She pointed out that tariff measures must be based on legitimate national security concerns, not political leverage. The legal process is moving through international arbitration channels, and trade lawyers recognize the urgency. After all, every day this continues means escalating damage to integrated supply chains. And let me tell you, the preliminary WTO ruling didn't hold back. It was a major blow for Trump's position. The arbitration panel declared that Trump's tariff justifications were legally insufficient under international trade law. That's legal speak for saying you've got no solid ground to stand on here. There's no legal validity to what you're doing. You're just abusing trade authority for political purposes. The WTO calling out American tariff policy by name created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding Trump that he isn't above international agreements. This is a huge deal that doesn't usually happen between allied nations. Trade experts are noting that we haven't seen this level of breakdown between the U.S. and Canada since the lumber disputes of the 1980s. According to Politico's report from February 21st, former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, a conservative trade hawk who helped negotiate USMCA, went on Fox Business and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that defending these tariffs in international arbitration would be nearly impossible given the existing agreement provisions. Just think about that for a moment. This is Trump's own former trade negotiator saying the policy is legally indefensible. And this is coming from a protectionist voice on conservative media. David Autor, an MIT economist specializing in trade, mentioned that unilateral tariff escalation against integrated supply chain partners typically results in negative GDP growth for both nations. When trade experts from both the political left and right start tossing around terms like economic self-harm and legally indefensible, that's the moment to really pay attention. The corporate response has been equally telling. According to CNBC's February 23rd report, General Motors announced they're considering shifting production lines out of the United States if Canadian aluminum supplies don't resume within 30 days. Ford issued similar warnings about Michigan assembly plants. These aren't idle threats from companies trying to score political points. These are hard-headed business decisions from executives who answer to shareholders and need predictable supply chains. When major American manufacturers start talking about moving operations because they can't get the materials they need, that's a massive red flag about the sustainability of Trump's trade strategy. The agricultural sector is taking hits too. Canadian retaliatory tariffs hit American wheat, corn, and dairy products particularly hard. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, agricultural exports to Canada dropped 40% in just 2 weeks. Farmers in the Great Plains are watching their primary export market disappear. These are the same rural voters who supported Trump in overwhelming numbers. Now they're the ones bearing the economic cost of his confrontational trade policies. Republican senators from agricultural states are getting phone calls from constituents who want to know why their livelihoods are being sacrificed for a trade war nobody asked for. So let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating trade dispute story. It has serious consequences for how American economic policy operates. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant criticism due to inflation concerns, and his approval ratings on economic issues are taking a hit. Republican representatives in border states are getting anxious about the upcoming 2026 midterms, which is definitely adding to the tension. The Canadian export halt is devastating Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. And honestly, that's not the best look for him. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for Canada as a vital ally and trading partner, even if they don't always agree with specific policies. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Trump believes he's above international agreements and does not hold free trade principles in high regard, and they'll have WTO rulings backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump's economic nationalism destroys American jobs. You can expect to see Canadian factory closures and American supply chain disruptions popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates. Now let's touch on what this means for business confidence itself. Warren Buffett, speaking at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting on February 22nd, has been working hard to maintain investor confidence and wanting markets to stay above partisan influence. But by commenting on the trade war, he waded right into a political controversy. Buffett said that integrated North American supply chains represent 75 years of economic cooperation, and dismantling them over tariff disputes would destroy trillions in accumulated business value. Buffett and his supporters are now poised to shift investment strategies away from trade-dependent sectors, implying economic uncertainty and questioning market stability, which complicates things for business confidence as a driver of growth. Yet Buffett probably felt he had no other choice. If he stayed silent while supply chains collapsed, his shareholders would take an even bigger hit. This situation shines a massive spotlight on whether trade agreements matter. At the heart of the issue is whether Trump can just ignore USMCA provisions whenever he feels like it. If he gets his way on that, it could totally change how international trade operates. The USMCA was designed to create stable, predictable trade rules between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It took 3 years to negotiate, involved hundreds of business stakeholders, and was ratified by Congress with bipartisan support. The entire point was to remove uncertainty and give businesses a framework they could rely on. But Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He craves total control over trade policy. If these tariff violations are allowed, that's a significant boost to presidential trade authority, and it opens the door for future presidents to misuse that power. So the implications of this case reach far beyond just Trump and Trudeau. It's about shaping the structure of American trade policy for many years to come. Each time Trump brushes aside trade agreements, violates negotiated terms, or attacks allied economies, it weakens American economic credibility. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If Trump can unilaterally break USMCA, what's to stop the next president from doing the same? If he can just impose tariffs whenever he wants, what's to prevent another leader from following that lead? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office. They become part of our new reality. And that's pretty dangerous. International trade relies on those agreements and institutional trust, assuming that countries will play by the rules, even when it's a bit inconvenient. When those norms crumble, global commerce itself starts to falter. Looking ahead to the 2026 midterms, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're still 8 months out from those elections, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of Trump battling allies and destroying supply chains, that spells trouble for Republicans in industrial states. Voters usually don't reward economic chaos and rising prices. They want stability and predictable growth. Right now, Trump isn't offering either of those. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring trade partnerships. After years of tariff wars under Trump, there are folks who believe that if you vote for them, international trade will actually start functioning again. They're promising no more constant trade disputes or fights with Canada, just good old normal economic policy. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some moderate Republicans. So here's the deal. Canada just halted critical exports to the United States in direct retaliation for Trump's 25% tariff threat. This isn't just a trade dispute, it's a fundamental breakdown of North American economic integration. If Trump forces this confrontation to continue, then we're basically saying international agreements don't matter anymore. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where presidential authority can override negotiated treaties. It's about so much more than just tariffs and trade flows. It's about whether we genuinely have a rules-based economic system or if we're just stuck with whoever can wield executive power most aggressively. So keep an eye on this situation closely. Things are just heating up. The WTO arbitration continues, retaliatory measures keep escalating, and American businesses are running out of patience with this entire mess. Business leaders from Detroit to Seattle are demanding resolution. The next few weeks are going to be crucial. The stakes have never been higher, the economic damage more severe, and the outcome more unpredictable.